Hi, I'm Jonty Pearce, I'm editor of Call Centre Helper, and today I'm going to be talking through 5 new tips for workforce management. My first tip is that you're soon going to need to start forecasting social media. Social media is certainly growing, and though only a small number of call centres are necessarily doing it, increasingly we'll find that customers will want to interact and complain through social media platforms. So it's very important as we start to come to grips that we start to be able to forecast those levels of interactions and look at them into the future. My second tip is one about watching out for the wallboard. Now, quite often we'll schedule breaks or ask people to go on break when we'll see a message that appears up on the screen like this one: no calls in queue. The problem is that message tells us what the situation is like now, not what the forecast is going to be. So I'd strongly advise you to go off and get the forecast before you send people away, because it may be things are very quiet now, but it's going to get very, very busy in a few minutes' time. My next tip is dealing with absence. Absence is one of the problems that an awful lot of call centres deal with. And it's often a very hidden problem, the one problem that everyone has that no one wants to talk about. In fact, one call centre manager described it to me as the A word. And one way to deal with absence in the call centre, and certainly one way to measure it, is to use something called the Bradford Factor. Now, if we take the case of a number of different cases of absence, where for instance you may have 1 absence of 10 days, 5 absences of 2 days, and 10 absences of 1 day. Now, if those are 3 different people, they all add up to 10 days. But obviously 1 absence of 10 days is an awful lot less serious than someone who just, has perhaps a bit of a drink problem, has hangovers and doesn't get into work, and has 10 absences of 1 days. The Bradford Factor is a way of dealing with that. And the way that the Bradford Factor works, and you can look it up on Wikipedia, is to use this factor. It looks an awful lot more scary than it is, but deals with basically looking at the number of instances of absence, which is S, squaring that and multiplying that times D, which is the total number of days of absence. So you'll see that, for instance, 1 absence of 10 days, perhaps someone got pneumonia, would be 10 points, whereas 10 absences of 1 day would work out as 1,000 points. So it's a very good way of benchmarking absence against all the people within the contact centre. And my next tip is around planning for outbound call centres. If you thought forecasting for inbound was tough, when you go into outbound, and certainly a blended environment, gets very difficult. And one bit of advice that we always would give is to ring fence a group of inbound agents that will help protect the service level once you start making outbound calls. So it's really important that you can forecast and schedule both for inbound and outbound. And my last tip is to cleanse your historic data. There all have days when call volumes go through the roof, or where, for instance during the World Cup, where call volumes started to fall off. And it's quite important that you purge those days out of your workforce management system. The difficulty is that the workforce management system would assume that if there's a peak on a day, that day will happen again the same time next year. So for instance, assuming there's a World Cup every year rather than once every 4 years. So it's very important to cleanse your historic data. So there you have it. Those are my 5 new tips for workforce management, and we'd be delighted if you send in other tips and we'll see if we can publish them in future issues of Call Centre Helper. Thanks a lot.